So here I am actually using an angled brush, and I'm showing you where to start your first. I'm just basically wetting it with water, and you're going to start your first mark with your paint. I wet the brush, and I take the brush and I put it where I want it, and then I go back and dip the tip into the paint. And you just do the tip, you don't do the entire brush. Do the tip, and then you're going to run it along the wet line that you just put on your pumpkin. And you can keep going back and you let it feather basically, but you want the darker part to be at the tip. I'm going to do that on the other side there. If you hear purring, it's because of this kitten I have. Now I'm going to start working on the other parts of the pumpkins, and you see that I'm wetting it first, and then I'm going to go back and dip the tip into the paint on just the long side of the angle, just the long side, and then you're going to let it feather in. And this is going to be basically showing you where, and I'm eyeballing this, there's no pattern. I'm just going to be trying to see where I want my pumpkin pieces to be. I want them to all be different because I'm doing so many different pumpkins and they all have the same layout. There's only really two sizes, the large and the small pumpkins. I'm trying to make them look different. So they may not look symmetrical to you, but pumpkins aren't supposed to be symmetrical. You'll see on that particular pumpkin I have, it looks like little white specks on the pumpkins, but that will be, it's just because they laid against the other pieces that I had next to it. I'm going to be going over it with different paint, and you'll see that soon. But as you can see, I just kind of keep turning the pumpkin so that I can make sure that the angle of my brush is away from me. The long angle part is away from me. You want to make sure that your brush is not saturated in water, so when you dip it, make sure whether it has paint or not, you really want to make sure that you touch it to the, I keep a little rag handy. I'm using a darker color. Actually, no, I'm not using the darker color yet. I'll be using a darker color to go over that. This is going to be in different layers, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And actually, this is the first time that I've actually made a video, and it's also the first time that I've used a ring light. My daughter, she loves to do videos, and she has a massive ring light. So I asked her to let me borrow it just for this video. So it's very hard for me to see the pumpkin like I'm normally able to see it to do my shading. I'm showing you the angled brush. I will be leaving the colors in the description below. These are acrylic paints. I bought my daughter's a paint set, I think at Hobby Lobby or something, and it came with all these acrylic paints. And I decided to use those because those were the ones that were handy. I didn't really have a ton of paint on hand at this time. For anyone who's asking, I actually have done, I used to do yard art way back in the day. I would say probably 20 years ago in my past life I used to do yard art. But because I liked doing, making them look a little bit more real, not many people were willing to pay for the time that it went into it, so I just started to enjoy doing it for my family. This particular pattern, I want to tell you, I actually got into using the Winfield collections. You can go online and look for Winfield collections. I'll leave a link below in the description, but you can go there and find a ton of different patterns that you can use to for whatever you want, whatever holiday, any kind of yard art. But this is a particular pattern I used for the outside of the pumpkin. It was originally for a jack-o'-lantern with the cute faces and stuff, but I personally wanted to, like I said, make just regular pumpkins for the yard. What I'm doing here is I'm actually using a darker color. And if you'll look at a real pumpkin, if you just take a minute and look at it, you'll see that pumpkins, because they grow, the way that they grow, they're going to be darker, and they'll have stains on the base of them, on the bottoms of the pumpkins. And I'm trying to emulate that. You really can't mess this part up. But if you just think about where the pumpkin sits is usually darker, not just for the shadow, but also because, like I said, they do grow sitting on the bottom, and they do have the darker spot sometimes. So if you happen to put a darker spot, just a random dark spot there, like on that front lobe I'm working on, it won't be that big of a deal. There I'm using a red color, like a more of a reddish orange, because if you do look at a pumpkin, you'll see that you're going to have its red tones, and I'm just trying to emulate that. At this point, I've done several of them, but at the first few pumpkins, I was honestly just trying to figure this out. I just was trying to think of what a real pumpkin looked like, and if you'll notice, they have so many different colors on a pumpkin that you've got your reds and yellows and greens and browns. It's not just the orange. But when you go to look at I'm going to call them lobes. I'm not really quite sure what they're called, but the different separate lobes on this pumpkin, I've noticed that if you look at the real pumpkins, you'll see like a yellow, like they get brighter on the insides and then immediately darker. So that's kind of what I'm trying to emulate there, but just do the tinges of the red on the outside. And again, because you're using water, a lot of water, which is good to do, it's pretty forgiving, but you want to make sure that you kind of spread that out. You don't want it to be globby. Just wanting to layer it. Want to stay away from directly on the insides of the lobes. You want to be on the outsides more, or the middles with your reds. Now I'm going to be working on a little bit lighter color yellow, or I guess a yellow orange, if you will. I'm going to be just adding again some more layers, because again, if you look at a pumpkin, you've got all these different colors, and I'm going to be having these setting out in the front yard along our walkway. And I got to thinking that, and again, I'm learning as I go, but I got to thinking that if you're looking at pumpkins out in the sunlight, the sun picks up on all those different tones, and I felt like it would be picking up on some of the yellow where the sun would hit it. So I am going to put yellow, as I'm doing right there, on the outsides of that dark rim. Now I've got my pinky out. You'll see the reason I'm doing that is to steady my hand, because you don't want to get on top of the dark. You want to stay right on the outside of it. And that's what I'm showing you there. Stay on the outside of it. And as soon as you get all that, and then you can do the tops of it. Blend it in really, really well. And you'll see that it kind of just starts giving it some dimension now when you add that color in. You don't want to just put it right along. You want to blend it out into the lobe of that pumpkin. And you're just going to keep doing that on the outsides of all the lobes. But again, don't touch the dark spot. Just keep going all the way around, but blend it really well. My daughter was getting a different angle to try to see if it would be any better. but you should still be able to see that there is, you're gonna have your yellows. You can see where I'm putting all my yellows. I just kind of randomly do it in the front. The front of the lobe there is just gonna be more random. I like to stay away from the edges of that front lobe. And now I'm gonna have the darker because I really wanna add the dark spots. I'm gonna really pay attention to the darker spots. I've used the same color on the dark edges. This is that dark shadow color. So I'm gonna start now focusing more on my shadow, where the pumpkin sits, and this is where I'm gonna start trying to give it some dimension. And if you also remember, when you're looking at a pumpkin, it's not perfectly round. They're almost not really like with nodules, but they're not perfectly symmetrical. They're gonna have like little indentions or whatever you call them, but they're not gonna be perfect. So again, this is really a part where it won't mess you up. Just if you think you've gone too dark, try to blend it out. If you think that it's way too dark to blend, take your rag and just dab the top where it's not gonna take too much off. You don't want to wipe. You'll end up taking off too much paint. This is going to be the lighter color. And this is basically where I'm going to now start focusing on the shadow, where the light hits the pumpkin. And again, you'll see this is just part of the layering. And I'm focusing more on the middle of the lobe, staying away from the edges. And you can be pretty haphazard here. I feel like you really can't mess this up if you just stay within the lines of doing your darker colors to define where your lobes start and stop, and then your lighter colors. But on these different colors like your reds and this yellow here, you're basically just embellishing it. This color right here is going to be the one that shows exactly where the light's going to hit it. It's going to be a really important part of this. So I try to think about where the light would hit it. You do not want to do just a streak of this. You really want to blend this. You don't want to do this around every single lobe. You want to just do certain ones because, again, remember, the light's not going to hit it perfectly all the way around because it's imperfect. But it is going to hit it more on the top. That's why I'm trying to focus more on the top. Just make sure you blend it really well. And you want to stay in the same direction. You want to, whatever you're going to do, go the same direction as your lobes. You don't want to go straight down. You want to you want to curve it like your lobes are. But remember to blend. And if you don't like what you have after you're finished, then you can go back and you can work with this as you see fit. Now I'm going to start working on the stem. This is the same color I used on the pumpkin shadowing at the very base and around the lobes. I'm going to use the same color on the stem. And the stem to me is really important because I wanted to make sure that it did look real enough, at least from the road, but I wanted to try to mock the way that the pumpkin vines grow. So I am going to do a base coat here. This is just going to be a base coat. Make sure I get the top and the edges, and then I'm going to show you how I try to achieve that look. of the way that the pumpkin grows. It's more of it's got those, the lawns that if you look at the pumpkin vines, it has these little, lawns on it, and it's not just a flat look. It's got a lot of texture to it. So I'm cleaning my brush completely. I wanted you to see that. It's completely clean. And now I'm going to take a darker color. Again, I'll have all this listed in the directions or in the description. I am going to do the angled brush technique I told you about. I've been doing that basically the entire time. I'm going to do the outsides with this darker brown. I'm going to make sure that's all dark. And then I'm going to blend it into the green. But when it comes to around the edge, the base of that pumpkin, the stem, when you're looking at the pumpkin, remember it's not completely, brown and dead. There's still some life to it, so you're going to have some greenery in it, but it's also going to be darker at that area because it sinks in. It's not poking out, so you want to make sure to try to get that depth. I'm actually doing a darker brown at the base over the top of that green. And I'm showing you that I'm taking my brush, and I'm going to be making these streaks all the way to the tip. They're going to try to follow the stem itself. I'm not just going, painting and just random things. I'm going straight back. I want to make it look like it's a line that goes from the base of that stem to the tip. You see how I'm making these streaks that go from the base to the tip, and I'm making those lines. I'm not deviating from the lines, but I want it to, to obviously follow the correct path. And now I'm going to take a green. There's my green, because the pumpkin still has a little bit of life in it. Obviously, it's not completely dried up. So we're going to add a little green. And this is just how I personally like to do it. You can do whatever colors you want, but I had so many people asking me to do a video on how I did my pumpkins. I figured I would give it a try. So here I am adding my green. I'm doing the same technique. And you don't have to do the green all the way around the pumpkin stem. You can just put it in as best you can. I noticed that I was losing a little bit of the brown, so I went back with the dark brown to try to put a little bit more back at the base. And then of course I've got this lighter green, and I'm going to now try to show a little depth by adding this only in the middle. And you want to do some light streaks just to show that it's actually in a rounded, it's rounded or whatever. Now, just remember that this is the first video that I've done, and I was using a ring light, so it was pretty hard for me to see my shades as much as I wanted to do. I wasn't able to get a good idea, but there is the pumpkin. So if you have any questions or comments, definitely